In celebration of My Chemical Romance's return, I have purchased myself MCR merchandise, which I've never had before. I know, I'm not a true emo. Get out of the way now. Speaking on the topic of clothing, boy, these aren't called stingers for nothing. On this episode of Sober Nile for once, we're going to be talking about Sword and Shield. More specifically, we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of Pokemon Sword and Shield. And before I get started, I want to talk about the reason why I wanted to make this video, other than the fact that I had no other ideas. Usually when you watch a video about, you know, before you buy, pros and cons, stuff like that, it's from Pokemon YouTubers. And the excuse they always give is that they're not paid by Nintendo, they're not paid by Game Freak, which I'm sure is true. Nintendo's not really one to sponsor YouTubers. Now, I'm not saying most Pokemon YouTubers aren't being genuine. I'm sure most of them are. Because, you know, I've seen some Pokemon YouTubers take a hardline stance against Sword and Shield. But it's disingenuous to say that because you're not getting paid by Nintendo or Game Freak, that means you have no reason to defend Sword and Shield unless you really were defending it. The fact is, your career depends solely on the success of this game. The more successful this game is, the more successful you are. That's a fact. And so, at least subconsciously, you're going to defend Pokemon no matter how much they fuck up. And so I wanted to give my opinion as someone who is not a Pokemon YouTuber. Hell, I'm not even a YouTuber at all, because I don't get paid for this. And so with that disclaimer out of the way, why don't we just jump into it. First, we're going to start off with the pros, the positives, the good things about Sword and Shield, because I do like being positive. I want to start off this video on a good note. The first pro is it's a Pokemon game. If you've liked the franchise in the past, chances are you'll probably like Sword and Shield. It's, by all definition, a Pokemon game. Say what you want about Dexodus, or Dexit, whatever you want to call it. Say what you want about animations and stuff like that. This is a Pokemon game. It's the same adventure that we've gone on countless amount of times, and whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's a Pokemon game. This is a bit more of a speculative one, but one that, fuck, I dropped my mic. I swear I'm sober for once. So this is a bit more of a speculative one, but I feel like it is pretty likely considering what we've seen in the trailers. The rivals. Much better rivals this time around, and we actually have multiple rivals, unlike previous games where we only had one, maybe two. I don't count X and Y as having multiple rivals. And at least one of them, again, speculatively, looks like they're going to be at least a little bit antagonistic to some extent. I want my rival to be throwing the worst insult at me so that when I beat their ass, it feels all the more satisfying. Marnie looks like she's going to be just an absolute cunt to you. She seems like one of those like spit on your grave kind of people. Next up is a one that I didn't think was going to be a pro given past generations. The Pokemon designs. The Pokemon designs, if you haven't seen the leaks, I'm not going to show them on screen. I'm not going to describe any of them or anything like that. But I was pleasantly surprised by the Pokemon designs. I was fully ready to see the Pokemon designs and just shit on them. But that doesn't look like it's going to be the case. The Pokemon designs look really awesome. And I'm really glad that for the first time since Generation 4, I will be picking the Fire Starter. The graphics in Sword and Shield look absolutely amazing for a Pokemon game. Obviously it doesn't compare to like Call of Duty or Destiny or anything like that. But the graphics are actually really nice. It's definitely a step up from the Gen 6 and 7 games. Those games looked like ass. And then on top of the fact that despite looking like disease-ridden placenta, it managed to also push the limits of the 3DS, which means that anytime you got into like a double battle or horde battle or anything like that, you just drop to like -5 frames per second. But Sword and Shield look amazing, and I don't exactly see Sword and Shield pushing the limits of the Switch because there are plenty of games on the Switch that look better than Sword and Shield. So I don't foresee any like lag happening whenever you go into like a double battle or anything like that. That's really nice. And then there's the wild area. The wild area looks like it's going to be the best thing ever in Pokemon. Like, of course it's not like a true MMO type thing, but it reminds me a lot of like patrol zones in Destiny. Like how you can just go into the wild area, you automatically join like a random server of 16, give or take, people, and you can just look around and see everyone else doing their own shit. I think that's amazing. With the wild area also comes max raid battles, which, when I saw this thing, it fucking blew my mind out of the water. Like, we can actually, like, they're putting raids in Pokemon, people. Literal raids. I think they can build upon this, because I'm gonna get into this next point when we get to the cons. But if they ever add Mega Evolutions back into the game with like the Gen 4 remakes, and maybe add more Mega Evolutions, possibly, who knows? They could make it so that the Mega Stones are rewards for these max raid battle-esque activities, if they were to build upon it and put it into the Gen 4 remakes. And then there's character customization. Now, we've had character customization in Pokemon since X and Y, which apparently character customization was meant to be like a Kalos only thing, but after seeing that it was such like a fan favorite thing in the Kalos region, they were like, oh shit, I guess this is a part of Pokemon now, which I'm really glad that they decided to do that. Having character customization be a Kalos only thing would have been a huge mistake. This is probably the most in-depth character customization we've ever had in Pokemon. Like, this is comparable to like SAO Fatal Bullet or like Saints Row 4 levels of like in-depth character customization, and I think that's really awesome. And then last but not least, there's Galarian forms. Now, I'm going to get into the con of this when we get there. It's really hard not to talk about the cons while talking about the pros, because just about every single fucking pro that there is in Sword and Shield has a fucking asterisk next to it. The idea of taking a beloved Pokemon, or maybe a Pokemon that doesn't get a whole lot of attention, and then sort of like remaking it into the vision for a newer region. I think that's really cool, and I'm glad that they are continuing that and building upon that with Galarian forms, since it's just about the only gimmick in the game that they're continuing to build upon, and not just making it a flavor of the week. Evolution! And now it's time for the cons, the negatives of Sword and Shield. The first one, and the most obvious, the one that you've all heard about, the Dex Cut, Dexit, Dexidus, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Point is, not every Pokemon's going to be in Sword and Shield. And this kind of leads into the next con. I don't really mind not every Pokemon being in the game. I don't care. When I go into a new game, I typically try to limit myself to the brand new Pokemon, or at the very least, limiting myself to the Pokemon I can find in the wild. I don't typically transfer. I think I've only transferred one time. I think I transferred my my Ash Greninja from Sun and Moon to Ultra Sun and Moon. That's about it. And it's already been confirmed that my sweet little babby boy Lucario, my favorite Pokemon of all time, has indeed made the cut into Sword and Shield. So I don't really care that much about Pokemon not being in the game. Woo! The problem is their reasoning for it. The reason they gave for cutting Pokemon out of the game, and I'll get to how many they cut in the next con. The reason they gave for cutting Pokemon out of the game was because they wanted to focus more on quality rather than quantity. They wanted to improve a small handful of Pokemon, or a relatively small handful of Pokemon, and put them into the game rather than just flooding the game with 900 plus subpar Pokemon, which I thought was an amazing idea. I thought that was great. I was like, okay, good on you, quality over quantity, that's amazing, I love that so much. But they didn't do it. Their main thing was they wanted to improve models and animations. Well, boy oh boy, surprise, surprise. Every single model and animation in Sword and Shield was just straight up transferred over from the Gen 6 and 7 games, with exception to the new Pokemon and new moves. What? If you're just transferring Pokemon over from the old games into the new ones, Why not just transfer them all? Why make the cut? There's absolutely, literally no difference from transferring 400, 500, 600 Pokemon from the old games into the new ones and just transferring them all. There's no point in not transferring all of them. There's zero extra work. All you're doing is pissing people off for no reason whatsoever. I can think of 2 reasons as to why they decided to cut Pokemon from the game, because better models and animation clearly wasn't fucking it. It was either because they wanted to set precedent for this down the road so that when they do decide, or if they do decide to improve models and animations for Pokemon, you know, everyone's already kind of been accustomed to the idea of not having every single Pokemon in the game, so because, you know, precedent was set for Sword and Shield, and they don't have to worry about making an announcement in the future. It's kind of like, you know, just rip the Band-Aid off now instead of waiting until there's even more Pokemon in the game and people get more pissed. The second reason is that there was literally no cartridge space left over for all the Pokemon in the game, so they decided to cut a lot of them out, which I'm a little bit more tempted to believe the second one, because it falls in line perfectly with the way Game Freak does things. A lot of you might already know this by now. In the Generation 2 games, Gold and Silver, obviously there was the post-game where you got to go to Kanto and everything. That was originally not supposed to be in the game, believe it or not. That wasn't supposed to be in the game at first because they were going to put it in the game, but they didn't have enough cartridge space left over to have it in the game. Because Game Freak doesn't optimize their games. And so I think it was Iwata that came into the office, did some optimization work, and suddenly they were able to fit Johto, or Kanto, into the Gen 2 games. And they haven't learned a lesson since then. If you go into the data for Sun and Moon, you can see multiple files for the same character are in the game. There are multiple models of the same character in every single fucking map that there is in the game, because they can't just be like, hey, load this character into this spot for this cutscene. For some reason, they're unable to do that. And so instead, they're like, hey, we have 10,000 models of Lily in the game. Grab this one for this cutscene when it happens. Instead of just, you know, I don't know, loading the Lily model into the game when you need it, and just waste a bunch of, cartridge space. You know, why not? Why? I can bet so much money that there's at least 10 gigabytes in Sun and Moon that's just completely wasted and doesn't need to be there. And that leads into the next con for Sword and Shield, con number 3, negative number 3, and it's exactly how many Pokemon are in the game. Now, a lot of people who sort of, I'll call them Game Freak apologists, always said when the deck cut was announced that, realistically we're still gonna get 600, 700, 800 Pokemon into the game. It's not like we're losing out on that much, right? 400 Pokemon are going to be in Sword and Shield, including the new ones. 400 Pokemon are going to be in this fucking... So they literally just cut out more than half of the decks for this fucking game. Great, perfect, cool, I love it. The next con, this is the thing that pisses me off the most. Game Freak seems to have this laser focus on Generation 1 Pokemon. Every single Galarian form in the game, other than Zigzagoon's line, is Gen 1 Pokemon. Shocking, right? I know, it's fucking mind-blowing. Blindsiding that they'll just do this again and just make all the Galarian forms Gen 1 Pokemon because Gen 1 doesn't get enough love, right? They seem to have an even tighter laser focus on Charizard specifically. As if it... And don't get me wrong, I love my baby boy Charizard. Again, I've chosen the Fire Starter all the way up until Gen 4. But, for the love of God, did Charizard not already get enough attention with Gen 6? He got 2 Mega Evolutions, for God's sake. Why do we then, after giving him so much love in Generation 6, why do we then also have to make it so that he's the only Cantonian starter in Sword and Shield, but also make it so that he has another form. Now, don't get me wrong, Charizard's Gigantamax form is pretty badass. But he shouldn't have one in the first place. If I'm being honest, he realistically really shouldn't be in the fucking game. The fifth con is no Megas, no Z moves. Now, Sun and Moon kind of made it pretty clear that Z moves were going to be like an Alolan exclusive thing, so I'm not too mad about them being out. Plus, I also kind of hated Z moves, so not too upset about them not being on Sword and Shield. But no Megas. Boy! Game Freak, you literally went through the trouble of making a multiverse canon in Pokemon through the Delta episode in Oras, exclusively to ensure that Mega Evolution makes sense within the lore of Pokemon. Why, then, do you go and cut Megas out of the game if you're going to go through the trouble of ensuring that they're going to be in the game from here on out in a way that makes sense? Game Freak has a notorious reputation of seeing what people want and then just veering to the opposite direction. The next negative is the fact that this game is $20 whole more expensive than the previous games. Now, I know that there are some people out there who are like, oh, $20, that's not a whole lot. I can pay a little bit extra for these games. Well, have fun with that, because you're paying an extra $20 for a game that really should realistically cost like 40 or 50. This is the same goddamn game that we've been playing for the last 20 plus years. Why the hell is it an extra $20? And that's not all the extra money you're going to be paying for this game, because in order to trade and see other people in the wild area, you're going to have to buy the Nintendo Online Service. On top of the $20 extra you're going to have to pay to get the game, compared to Pokemon games in the past, you also have to pay, I don't know, how much is Nintendo's online service? Oh, okay, that's actually not bad. That's actually not bad. $20 for a whole year. That's actually pretty good. The last con is for all you shiny hunters out there. This is a small one. Most of you probably won't care about this. Hell, I don't care about it. But the starters are shiny locked. You're not going to be able to get shiny Scorbunny. You're not going to be able to get shiny Grookey or shiny Sobble. If that affects you, then that sucks. If it doesn't affect you, then it's just... For any of you who think that I have a bias against Sword and Shield and I put a lot more cons on here than pros, the fact is, if you look at my list right now, I'll actually move the camera a little bit. If you look at my list, let me lower the exposure a bit. If you look at the list, there's actually an even amount of pros to cons, because I do have a bias against this game. That is a fact. I have taken a hardline stance against Sword and Shield in the past. So I wanted to actively fight that bias by making sure I had an even amount of pros and cons. I just have a little bit more to say about the cons, which is why it might seem like I have more negatives than positives to say about this game, but the fact is, they're evenly distributed. I think it'll be a fun game, but I'm not getting it day one. My plan, personally, and you don't have to follow this, you can get the games day one if you want, you can get the games never if you want, if you just really hate Sword and Shield that much. But my plan currently is I want to wait till it goes on sale for $40 or less, because I really think that's what this game should cost. And that's going to be the end of today's video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed. Leave a like if you did. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I will hopefully see you all in my next video, which is exactly 1 week from now. This is Niall, signing out.